I mysteriously found myself home alone with a haunted presence that turned my world upside down. I never should have opened that door. It all started like a typical evening, the kind where I'd just throw on a movie and sink into my couch, ready to be consumed by lazy comfort. My room was dimly lit, a hum of my refrigerator echoing through the stillness. The shadows danced on the walls, flickering timidly with each breath of wind that crept through the cracks in the old house that I felt the chill settle deep in my bones, wrapping around me like a tight blanket, urging me to stay alert. That sensation, the prickling on the back of my neck, suddenly buzzed to life. Just as I reached for the remote, a faint whisper slithered through the air, barely audible yet striking. It was a voice, smooth and chilling, weaving through my very thoughts. My heart raced as I struggled to focus, the calm of my evening ruptured by a low thrum of fear. Something wasn't right. I glanced around. The shadows grew, flicking like flames from a distant fire. The air turned thick, suffocating almost. Then, a sudden crash echoed from the hallway. My pulse hammered in my ears. I hesitated, dread coiling tightly in my stomach. Footsteps. Soft. Unearthly. They shuffled closer, almost mocking me. The hairs on my arms stood tall, alive with anticipation of something horrific. I squeezed my eyes shut for a fleeting moment, wishing the darkness away. When I opened them, I wondered if my imagination had taken control. The air was heavy, thick with an electric charge, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to know. Suddenly, something moved. A shadow darted past the doorframe, leaving only a lingering chill in its wake. I froze, breath hitching. It was there, something unseen, lurking, waiting in the shadows. I could almost hear the heartbeat of the house, in sync with my own escalating panic. Then, the whispers surged again, louder this time, swirling around me with a sinister glee. My heart pounded wildly, breath coming shallow and quick. The chill coiling around me tightened, urging me to flee, yet I was rooted in place. Thoughts fled my mind as the atmosphere thickened, an idea shadowing my gut. I had to know what was behind that door. I had to find out. Just as I gathered the strength to move, the doorknob rattled violently, its metallic noise a harsh betrayal in the stillness. I stumbled backward. The door creaked, groaned, as if something beyond awaited entry, desperate to spill into my world. I closed my eyes, those whispers now a cacophony, mingling with my racing heartbeat, and then, silence. Total, unbearable silence. That was when I saw it, a figure, faint but unmistakable, just beyond the doorframe, cloaked in shadows, twisted in form. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lurked just beyond the doorframe, a grotesque silhouette flickering like a distant star fading into the void. My mind raced as I struggled to process the nightmarish sight. It didn't possess the definition of a human. Instead, it was a chaotic amalgamation of shadows and lines, its limbs elongated and twisted, defying all sense of proportionality. The air around it seemed to warp, cold and heavy, as if the space plunged into a deeper darkness than I could fathom. Each heartbeat echoed loudly in my ears as I pressed against the wall, my fingers digging into the peeling paint as I battled the rising tide of terror. How long had it been watching me? The whispers shaped themselves into a chant, syllables brushing against my skin like 1,000 furious wings. Ghostly voices, living in the darkest recesses of fear, began mapping out the scape of my mind. "Let us in," they murmured. "Let us see." I shook my head, as if denial could dispel them. My instincts screamed for me to retreat, to flee from this insidious presence, but I was paralyzed, my feet seemingly glued to the floor. I felt as though I were sinking into the shadow, being drawn toward the unknown, urged to forsake reason and embrace the horror that festered in the darkness. A sudden and unnatural movement, the figure lunged forward with a haunting grace. My instincts scrambled into action as I stumbled back, eyes wide with frantic dread. The door slammed shut, echoing through the silence, the very foundation of the house trembling under the chaos. Searing panic clawed at my chest. I rushed to my bedroom window, heart racing as I flung it open only to be met with a silence that swallowed everything, not even the wind dared to breathe. The world outside looked alien, bathed in an unholy glow but devoid of life. My neighborhood lay still, shadows lurking between the trees like feral predators waiting for the right moment to strike. Breath hitching in my throat, I turned back to the room, scanning for the monster that had just been threatening my very existence. The whispers grew quieter, but more insistent, swirling around me like a fog. They formed incomprehensible words, beckoning me into their sleepy grasp. I staggered toward the door, unsure if I could even trust myself to hear them any longer, drawn by a strange need for answers. Suddenly, the floor creaked beneath me, an unmistakable weight that shouldn't have belonged. I whirled around, my heart beating violently in sync with the deep thuds that began echoing through the dimly lit hallway. The thumping, rhythmic and primal, grew louder, more urgent. It was the sound of something alive, something that didn't belong in this world. As I stood frozen, paralyzed by dread, the whispers shifted sharp, accusing, as if they pointed a ghostly finger at me. "You summoned us," they chanted, ratifying a truth I was unprepared to face. The shadows in the corners twisted and churned, swelling into menacing forms that flickered just out of sight. "You wish to know?" I felt the air change again, a wave of oppressive pressure washed over me. The heartbeat of the house quickened, an echo of fear mingled with mine, thumping through the walls, coursing through the very fibers of the building itself. I stumbled backward, feeble against the ever-crushing dread now resonating through every inch of my surroundings. Before I could catch my breath, the whispers grew louder, reverberating with a sinister harmony, casting shadows across the room that seemed to breathe and writhe. I turned toward the door, ready to bolt, when it cracked open ever so slightly, the hinges creaking like a funeral dirge. From the sliver of darkness, I could see a deeper shadow pooling, growing larger, a void that seemed intent on swallowing all remaining light. Then, something gripped my ankle from beneath, icy fingers drawing me down into the darkness. I screamed, the sound lost in the morbid cacophony of whispers. As I was pulled into the yawning maw of terror, I caught one last glimpse of the figure standing by the threshold, now illuminated in the maddening light that siphoned away my sanity. It smiled. Not a smile of joy, but of sinister delight, a knowing grin that promised pain as the world around me dissolved into chaos. Just before darkness engulfed me completely, the last thing I heard was the echo of my own voice, distorted and twisted. "Let us out." The world that followed was a tumult of sensations and shadows, a relentless storm of chaos that clawed at the edges of my consciousness. I felt weightless and heavy at once, the very fabric of reality around me stretching into grotesque contours. Something grasped at the fabric of my mind, unraveling it thread by thread, and every fragment tore away like simmering flesh against the heat of a flame. I was no longer in my room, but in a place that felt simultaneously familiar and alien, an endless corridor painted in bleeding colors, its walls whispering remnants of forgotten memories. Flickering lights buzzed overhead, seething with static, casting shadows that danced along the ground like phantoms in a trance. The cacophony of whimpering voices pulsed through my ears, lapping against the shores of sanity. "Join us," they pleaded, their tones laced with both despair and desire. "Join us." I staggered forward, compelled against my will, my pulse thrumming in sync with that sinister chant. As I rushed down the hallway, it warped around me, windows stretching and distorting, time swirling into a viscous goo of anguish. I was lost, trapped in a labyrinth forged from my own fear. From up ahead, a soft glow emanated, flickering like a timid flame in the dead of night. Drawn towards it, I stumbled into a room bathed in soft luminescence that felt at once comforting and perilous. It was there I found the remnants of a once ideal home, its furniture grown brittle with age, photographs faded and peeling, and trinkets bursting with dust. Yet it was the center of the room, the mirror, that drew me in. The mirror stood tall, its silver frame ornate yet tarnished, reflecting a world that danced just beyond my grasp. As I stepped closer, the glow intensified, casting my own frail shadow against the reflection. But the visage staring back was not mine, it morphed and twisted, showing an amalgamation of faces drenched in sorrow and twisted agony, mouths agape in silent screams. I recoiled instinctively, but the shadows in the mirror surged forward, reaching through the glass with skeletal hands, grasping at the air with desperate longing. "Help us," they cried in unison, their eyes devoid of hope, hollow sockets that bore the crushing weight of despair. A wave of recognition washed over me. Each face, contorted with terror, felt personal. They were people I once knew, lost souls who had wandered into this macabre purgatory they had tried to escape. In their eyes, I saw myself reflected not as an observer, but as a vessel for their pain. Suddenly, the whispers swelled into a tumultuous roar that threatened to engulf me, drowning out my thoughts. The temperature of the room dropped drastically, making my skin break out in goosebumps as icy fingers traced my spine. My breath hitched in panic when I felt the force behind me, a pressing presence that radiated malicious intent. I turned and faced the flickering shadow, the twisted figure that had watched me through the door. It loomed larger than before, its elongated limbs stretching grotesquely, appearing as if they could reach from the floor to the ceiling. The smile twisted across its face, sharp and merciless, harboring an insatiable hunger. "You have returned," it said, its voice a hiss that slithered across my skin. "Now you belong to us." Suddenly, my heart raced with a new storm of terror. The whispers rose and fell like waves crashing on an unseen shore. "Join us," they beckoned, now more compelling than ever. Just as I turned to flee, the mirror shattered, sending shards flying through the air, each fragment reflecting an endless cycle of horror that beckoned to be understood. Falling backward in shock, I felt a sharp sting against my arm. A piece of glass had carved a line through my skin, and I looked down to see blood pooling in rivulets against the floor. In that instant, I was dragged into the web of voices that enveloped my being, pulling me closer to the edge of despair. The shadows writhed with laughter, their whispers malevolent, delighting in my plight. And just when I thought I might scream, the ground beneath me cracked open, revealing a swirling abyss, a portal to an infinite horror. "Let go," the voices crooned, "and come home." As I teetered on the precipice of this void, an overwhelming force clenched my heart with the weight of 1,000 souls, unyielding and insatiable, pulling me closer to the edge. In a final moment, I realized that I wasn't merely a spectator in this dance of darkness. I had become the very conduit they sought. Then the world blurred, the light dimmed, and I found myself staring directly into the void. The last echo of my sanity faded as I felt their collective longing pull me into the dark. "Let us be free." And I fell, lost in the maw of terror, with a chilling promise lingering in the air. "Welcome home." I awoke, or at least I thought I did, but my surroundings seemed unreal, glistening with an ethereal glow that made everything shimmer and pulse. It was a room fashioned from shadows and light, continually slipping from grasp, as if the very essence of my reality was melting. Each corner of the room appeared to breathe in synchronization with a low hum, a haunting melody of sorrow that reverberated through the walls. That I pulled myself to my feet, disoriented, and forced my gaze away from the inescapable pull of the darkened veil within the mirror's remnants. The shards glinted ominously, each reflecting a portion of my anguish, twisting my features into expressions of despair. My heart raced as the room began to swirl, enveloping me in a tapestry of darkness interwoven with memories, and shadowy figures danced just beyond the periphery, their details lost in the haze. The whispers circled me like a tempestuous wind, now distinct phrases tumbling into clarity. "You cannot escape, you belong." Their tones shifted into a rhythmic chant that echoed my fractured thoughts, gnawing at my apprehensive heart. They wanted my very essence to serve as a conduit to the suffering they held captive. That I stumbled toward the door, grappling with the remnants of unyielding terror. My hand hovered above the knob, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, yet I pushed it open, plunging myself into the hallway beyond. This corridor stretched infinitely, lined with doors that seemed alive, throbbing as though they contained breathing entities on the other side, a collection of deceptions waiting to claw their way out. As I navigated the tight constriction of that corridor, a soft, pleading voice bloomed from one of the doors, laced with urgency. "Help me!" it cried, reminiscent of a child's tremor. My heart clenched. Was this another soul trapped in the web, or merely a cruel imitation conjured by the darkness. Against all reason, I approached the door, driven by cowardly intrigue and morbid curiosity. With a trembling hand, I grasped the knob and swung the door wide. It opened to a dimly lit room, the air thicker than molasses, and a figure knelt in the center, rocking back and forth. A spectral glow illuminated a child's face, one marked by innocence yet marred by unspeakable sorrow. "They want to let me go," she whimpered, her eyes hollow like the depths of the abyss I had briefly encountered. Who want to let you go?" My voice trembled, each word dripping with dread. The girl raised her eyes, reflecting a cosmic horror that transcended reason. "Them," she whispered, pointing to the darkness that thrummed just beyond the threshold. "They want you to join them. Don't fall for their lies." Suddenly, the shadows coalesced behind her, transforming into undulating figures that lashed out with anguished wails, surrounding her in a storm of despair. "You must embrace it. You must plunge into the void." They shrieked, their voices blending into an unholy symphony of grief that reverberated through my bones. Gasping, I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in protest against the oncoming tide. I could feel the walls of the corridor constricting, drawing closer as though they meant to consume me whole. Without thinking, I dashed down the hall, heart racing, fear fueling my legs. I could hear the echoes of my own frantic footsteps intermingling with the haunting laughter of the shadows. "You can't escape us," they taunted, their voices dripping with malice. My vision blurred, and I felt the cold caress of their presence creeping ever closer. Desperation sharpened my senses as I reached the next door, slamming it open, hoping to find refuge. Instead, the room collided with my senses, a tempest of ghastly visages, each tormented soul grappling in the air, their mouths moving in silent screams. Ghostly whispers wrapped around me like chains, binding me to an existence that bled despair, and then, as if awakened by my presence, the spirits turned, eyes igniting with fervent hunger and longing. I was no longer just an observer to their wrath, I could feel their collective will, their need surging through my veins like toxic fire. The spectral child's words echoed in my mind, but before I could react, I was lifted off my feet, pulled into their seething mass. "No!" I screamed, thrashing against the thrumming darkness, and then dread washed over me. The room around me twisted and buckled. I could feel my very essence beginning to tear at the seams. And then the winds grew fierce, a cyclone of tortured souls drawing me deeper into their despair. I was surrounded by ghostly hands, fingers cold and unyielding, grasping at me as if laying claim to my soul, and just as I thought I would be lost forever, a blinding light burst through the walls, a crack that shimmered with hope. The tortured souls shrieked in agony and repulsion, the howls growing louder until it became a choir of chaos, drowning out everything else. "Escape!" The whisper beckoned from the light, reverberating against the clamor of voices. With a surge of adrenaline, I hurtled toward that fragmented radiance, fighting against the forces holding me back. Every inch felt like wading through a morbid sea. My heart raced against time as I clawed at the light, yearning for release, but just before I reached its embrace, the darkness surged forward with a deadly fury, echoing the words that would haunt me forever: "Welcome back." With a final, chilling laugh, the light shattered, plunging me into a depthless shadow. A chorus of anguished voices erupted around me in a crescendo of despair, tightening their grip, ensnaring my very essence once and for all, and suddenly, there was silence. Total and utter silence, followed by the chilling realization, I was no longer me. The horrors of the past swirled around me, the souls now entwined within. And as I turned to confront the spectral child, I saw her smiling, a mirror reflecting my own hollow eyes. "Now we are free," she whispered, merging into the darkness. And standing there, I became acutely aware that I was no longer alone. A whisper danced on the air, melodic yet unyieldingly sinister: "You belong to us now." Behind me, doors began to tremble and shake, and deep from within, the shadows stirred anew, churning an uncategorical dread that beckoned with unfathomable resolve. Gaze locked forward, I sensed movement in the corners of the now familiar hall, my own voice echoing back, beckoning to others trapped within the suffocating folds of the dark. "Join us." The air grew thick, suffocating, with a sweltering heat that cloaked my form like a shroud. An inescapable sense of familiarity wrapped around me, yet it refracted through a lens of unimaginable horror. The spectral child's presence lingered just beyond sight, and I realized with dread that I was now part of an enigmatic twilight circle, a grim congregation beneath the mansion's oppressive weight. "Join us," my echo offered, a siren-esque call entwined in its sorrowful timbre, reverberating down the corridor with an eerie resonance. Each word felt like a knife against the fragile fabric of my consciousness, tethering my spirit to the abyss around me. With unsteady legs, I navigated the flickering shadows that documented the history of despair, moving closer to the nearest door. Its handle, frigid and slick, beckoned me with an inexplicable gravity. To my horror, inside, an assemblage of countless faces squirmed and wept, visages I half recognized, twisted in agony and pleading silently. They weren't mere spirits, they were memories of all my past, vulnerable and exposed to the insatiable depths of darkness. Suddenly, the air crackled. I turned, the softness of whispering breath wrapping around me, icy fingers brushing against my cheek. "Let them in," it urged sweetly, and within an instant, the collective wails crescendoed, drowning out rational thought. The shadows squeezed tighter, as if waiting with bated breath for my answer. Panic surged anew. I staggered back, only to feel the overwhelming embrace of the spectral child pulling against me once more, urging me to commune, longing for a deeper connection, one that transcended morality and stripped bare the nuances of self. "You are one of us now," she crooned, her voice a haunting lullaby that echoed softly in the recesses of my mind. "No. This isn't me." I rasped, grappling with the frayed edges of my humanity as I clawed against the ebb and pull of the memories encroaching around me. They yearned to reclaim their host, and the shadows, too, writhed with avarice, but the more I resisted, the louder my echo became, no longer a whisper, but a cry that shattered the tenuous veil between here and the vast, wretched expanse that awaited just beyond. "Join us." It beckoned again, a cacophony of chilling familiarity that bled into each soul around me. In that moment of frantic clarity, I turned to the figure whose cold, haunting smile matched my own, a warped reflection of innocence lost forever. Her luminous cheekbones glimmered beneath towering shadows, drawing me in with a hunter-esque fervor. She, a dark twin, was nothing more than an extension of what I had become, entangled within the nightmarish web of my own design. The walls trembled, breathing life into the dormant pain held captive, and with it, a rumbling discord surged through the air like a storm ready to be unleashed. Laughter erupted, pealing forth like the tolling of a wicked bell, and I was cracked open, flooded by memories, each nimble, frightened soul touching upon my own. I recoiled, the cold seeping deeper into my bones. With every heartbeat, I could feel them gnawing at the edges of reason, fragments of their torment bleeding into me, carving out spaces I fought so desperately to hold on to. "This can't be my fate," I howled, clenching my fists as I stumbled backward, but as the shadowy bodies pushed forward, filling the corridor like an unrelenting tide, I realized I stood at the threshold of a decision. I could no longer tell where I ended and they began, as the brightness of my memories was consumed by thrumming darkness. The gate between us, once impenetrable, was now a tattered veil long since obscured by grief. Altering my course, I dashed toward the farthest door, praying it might lead to escape rather than entrapment. Yet just as I reached for the knob, a foreboding growl emanated from the depths behind me, resonant and ancient. The shadows hissed, rushing through the air with a hungry fervor, the cocoon of anguish they fed on sensing my defiance. That I opened the door, falling into a void beyond comprehension, and instantly felt the world tip upside down. The disorientation was dizzying, a kaleidoscopic swirl of memories and regrets, swirling like a tempest around me. I grasped desperately for stability as voices thundered, a desperate chorus that crescendoed into a ferocious storm, drowning out the lingering fragments of self. A single truth remained constant in the chaos: they were coming for me, and this time, there would be no escape. As I spiraled deeper into the abyss, my resolve fractured, and I could feel the very essence of who I was begin to dissolve. Just as a searing warmth threatened to envelop me wholly, I glimpsed the shadows swirling together, a spectral form manifesting with an unfathomable weight. "Welcome back," it hissed, its voice slithering into my mind as the darkness wrapped tightly around me like the embrace of a lost lover. And beneath the tumult, resonating through the wide expanse of my torment, I heard one final, chilling whisper filtering through the air, "Would you like to play with us?" The world around me solidified gradually, the tempest of memories now waning as a clarity intertwined with dread. I had thought I fell into a boundless void, yet reality returned with an alarming vividness. I was no longer suspended within chaos. Instead, I stood in a dimly lit room, its walls lined with peeling wallpaper that sputtered of age and neglect. The air was still impregnated with the musty scent of decay, morose tendrils swirling instinctively closer with each stagnant breath I took, but it wasn't the room alone that wrapped around me, it was the feeling of being watched, a consuming gaze pressing against my skin, leaving no corner of my psyche untouched. I turned, meeting the cold, unyielding eyes of the dark twin who had reflected my agony back to me. The apparition lingered at the threshold like a malevolent guardian, its smile twisting into something cruel as it beckoned me further inside. "Welcome home," it taunted, the words dripping with sarcasm. Shadows rippled behind her as if painted by unseen hands, coiling intricately around her form, and yet, they felt unearthly. Fissures cracked through the wallpaper like arteries, pulsating and releasing whispers that spoke of lives lost and dreams unfulfilled. "Where am I?" I choked, heart racing as alertness budged against my overwhelmed senses. "Home," she replied, her voice more a hiss than a statement, the edges sharpened in its malevolence. I stumbled deeper into the room, each step tethered with hesitation, the surroundings shifting ever so slightly, bending at the edges of perception as the very fabric of reality trembled with a deep-rooted unease. The faded photographs that adorned the walls appeared to sway as if alive, their once muted colors flickering like dying embers, drawing my attention toward them. Faces turned toward me, eyes hollowed yet alight with malignant glee, mouths contorting into wide, manic grins. In one photograph, I recognized a semblance of my own childhood, framed in a backyard that seemed eerily familiar. "Do you remember?" The dark twin crooned, her voice ringing with malice. "Those carefree days. Oh, how naive you were, believing you could leave it all behind." She stepped closer, her aura intertwining with the shadows, merging with the despair that suffocated the room's atmosphere. Memories crashed over me, unleashing phantoms of joy that quickly twisted into anguished recollections. I had grown up here, this was undeniably my home. The realization tightened like a noose around my throat, and desperation surged within me. I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind me, an ominous thud reverberating off the walls like the sound of a coffin sealing a fate. "Why do you run?" my reflection asked, tilting its head, false innocence cascading through the edges of a sinister grin. "We only wish to play." The lights above flickered violently, the shadows danced with fervor, expanding contorted shapes that reached for me, fingers of darkness grazing my arms, inducing terror that wormed deep into my mind. Through the tumult, I could hear snippets of laughter echoing from corners of the room, muffled revelations hushed by the walls that held forgotten screams, spirits desperate to be heard. Sudden silence cracked the air, thick and suffocating, as the laughter echoed away, replaced by a heartbeat, a dreadful, rhythmic pulsing like that of a great, slumbering beast. I realized with horror that it mirrored the thrumming in my chest. "Join us," the voices sang out once more, a ghostly union intertwining in the air, the familiar beckoning pulling at me with insidious hunger. The darkness swayed against the walls, coiling tighter, limbs reaching outward in a dreadful embrace. The floor beneath me creaked, and I felt an unnatural pull, as if the house itself was yearning for me to surrender, to melt into its grotesque embrace. I staggered, my heart racing, and instinct took hold. I clutched at the edges of the nearest photograph, attempting to wrench it from its position on the wall. But it wouldn't move. It was as if the image had fused with my very being, roots of memory anchoring me in this malevolent space. And then the heartbeat grew louder, vibrating through my body, and with it came a rumble. The very foundation of the house quaked with a life of its own. The sound twisted and stretched, morphing into cries of children, caught in an eternal game of suffering. I could see them now, trapped within the framed glass, tiny faces pressed against the barrier, writhing in agony behind the precious memories, begging for release. "Let them out," the dark twin coaxed, her tone pitched in excitement, a frenzy of pure malice dancing in her voice. They play so well together. I whirled around, breathless with panic as I realized the true depths of my entrapment. Stop it! I screamed, voice cracking as I found myself ensnared within the collision of laughter and screams. The walls screamed, and for every desperate cry, shadows flooded the room, and a bitter hope twisted in my gut. I felt the palpable grip of despair as they clawed at my sanity, a sinister game that would pull me into their world one I could not escape, and then I heard a child's voice, distinct and clear amidst the cacophony, calling my name. Help me, it wept, the sound wrapped in unending sorrow. My instinct urged me to respond, but before I could move, the house grew silent again. In that oppressive stillness, I realized it had stopped. But something worse lingered in the air, something lurking just beyond the periphery of my vision. My heart thundered with renewed terror as I turned my focus to the shadows. The dark twin no longer stood beside me. Instead, the reflections of the lost were now fully embodied, scattered specters swirling with intent. We're hungry, they hissed in unison, their eyes burning brighter with desire, their form almost coiling around me, trapping me in the very memories that once provided solace. Just as I felt my sanity slip, the spectral chorus crescendoed, would you like to play forever? And in that moment, the floor began to split open beneath my feet, a sucking void waiting to consume me whole, with nowhere to escape. My scream was swallowed by the darkness as I fell into its relentless embrace, and from the depth came a question, echoing through the abyss, heavy and ominous, are you ready to join the game? The ground beneath me cracked open with a sinister grin, unveiling a chasm that pulsed in time with the accursed heartbeat that haunted the room. Cold air rushed up from the abyss, wrapping around my legs like a serpent, as the insatiable echoes of disembodied laughter circled overhead, mocking my plight. Dread washed over me, intertwining with disbelief. I was to become just another lost soul, a pawn in the house's grotesque game. Help me! The child's voice still echoed, now mixing with an assortment of whispers, the entangled cries of those who had come before me. Shadows swirled about, growing thicker, more intricate, creating strands of dark lace that snared my feet, pulling me ever closer to the edge of oblivion. In a final desperate grasp for tether to reality, I clawed at the floor, the splintered wood biting into my palms, as if it too was alive with terror. No! I can't! I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper amid the cacophony, demanding a reprieve from the shadows hungry for my madness. I can feel your fear, and it is delicious. A multitude of voices chimed, their tones warped and distorted, weaving tales of despair and sorrow that seeped into my bones. That I was still fighting, my heart thundering against the barricade of my ribcage, as the very fabric of the room began to unravel. In the shifting darkness, shapes emerged, flickering between the veil of this world and that which no eyes should see. Distinct silhouettes of children danced across the walls, their faces twisted in a grotesque blend of terror and delight. They taunted me, their little voices layered atop one another, until they sounded like a grotesque symphony of chaos. Will you play with us? They cooed, and every syllable twisted my stomach further. I barely registered the solid form of my dark twin rise from the shadows, her features barely visible yet unmistakably present, the malevolence radiating from her palpable as the stench of decay. Embrace them, she hissed, inching closer until her breath wrapped around my throat like a tightened noose. You can save them, just take one of their hands. It's so easy. She extended her darkened fingers toward me, an invitation smeared in torment. The children's faces pressed against the fabric of reality, impossibly contorted, eyes pleading yet aware of the malevolent desires that churn just beneath the surface. They all shifted, forming a twisted circle around me, their combined weight suffocating my resolve. Terror surged through me as they chorused, choose, 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 for they are never free until you decide. Get back! I roared, adrenaline coursing, fueling the fire in my heart as I kicked out my legs, feeling resistance, gasps of horror escaping from gaping mouths, echoing through the corners of my mind. I was suffocating, drowning in choices I couldn't bear to make, but the walls were closing in. And then, against the oppressive darkness, a sharp light burst forth. It flickered just in front of me, illuminating a wooden silhouette, a door I had not noticed before. It stood there, etched with strange, swirling patterns that seemed to breathe, yearning for the warmth of life. Part of me, the instinct for survival, urged me to reach for it, to free myself from the horror that surrounded me, but as I reached, the shadows recoiled, a guttural sound emanating from them, a warning pulsing along with the heart that throbbed beneath. "No door exists without a price," the dark twin chuckled malevolently. "If you leave, you must take one with you." The spectral whispers surged again, rising in urgency and fervor as dozens of hands clawed at me, tiny fingers grazing my skin, icy and desperate. "We just want to play." They beckoned, their voices sweet like honey yet laced with venom. I was losing it, the choice pressing heavily on my mind, fingers trembling against the threshold of the door that pulsed with hope and despair alike. Torn between the instinct to flee and the heart-wrenching cries for help, I took a step toward the doorway, teetering on the precipice of both escape and damnation. The children's screams morphed into laughter, a cacophony of joy that twisted deep within my gut. In that critical moment, something in me shattered, the barrier dissolved, a surge of raw anguish flooding my senses. The shadows coiled, their malignant laughter rising above my own heartbeat. A shudder crept through me, I felt the floor beneath crack more profoundly, a tether suddenly marrying me to both freedom and torment. The door glowed fiercely, yet beyond it lay a world I could barely fathom. As I reached for it, the shadows lunged, entwining my arms and forcing me back. The dark twin watched with a wicked grin, gleeful horror dancing in her eyes. "Dare you choose?" she taunted as the shadows thickened, creating a dreadful presage of what was to come. With the ground devouring cracks like hungry jaws, I caught sight of a small hand framed by the ghastly shadows, reaching for me from the void below. Would it grasp mine, or would it pull me down into the dark depths of despair? "Make your choice," she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. And with a deafening pulse of light, the house trembled, ready to seal the fate of not just me but perhaps all of us within its haunted walls. Panic surged through me as the shadows writhed closer, overwhelming my senses. The sensation of the icy child's hand reaching up from the abyss felt unreal, a paradox of charm and dread. I hesitated, caught in a net of fear and temptation. I was being torn apart, one half longing for the warmth of the child's innocent grasp, while the other recoiled from the malevolence that journeyed with it. "Choose, choose, choose," the disembodied voices swirled around me, deepening the echo of dread. The light from the door flared brighter, casting grotesque shadows against the crumbling walls, illuminating the twisted faces of the children. Each one a testament to sorrow, playfulness abruptly shattered by an agonizing fate. For a fleeting moment, I locked eyes with a girl on the fringe of the group, her gaze a tempest of hope and fear. She wore an expression both pleading and ominous, as if she was aware of the bargain about to unfold. "Don't let it take you!" she screamed, her small frame taut with desperation. The ground beneath me groaned, fissures splitting wider, and the darkness beckoned, promising to consume all that I was. The dark twin laughed, a sound of pure malice laced with delight, her form flickering in the light. "Their freedom comes at your expense, dear. A simple choice, one for another. Who will it be?" "Stop!" I shouted, the words tearing free as the pressure mounted. My mind whirled in confusion. A choice? How could I weigh an innocent life against my own? In my heart, I knew, either way, I was damnable. A chill washed over me as I glimpsed visions of myself shrieking, tormented just like them, a soul bound to this cursed house for eternity. The shadows closed in, constricting, wrapping tighter with every heartbeat until, at last, I felt the revulsion peel away any lingering hesitation. "I'll do it. I'll take someone's hand." I pressed forward, driven only by the insistent need to escape and save myself, a duality inherently human. With a heart-stopping gasp, I seized the icy little hand that ventured upwards, squeezing it with unyielding desperation, but as my fingers grasped that fragile entity, a sickening understanding twisted my insides. The hand was not warm, it was a specter of despair, a harbinger of dread. I jerked back, but it was too late. The house exhaled an unbearable sigh, the walls shuddering, and the agonized cries of countless children erupted, drowning me in a torrent of anguish. "You've chosen." The dark twin screeched as I stumbled, losing my footing. The shadows lashed out, the child's hand slipping from mine like quicksand. Her scream echoed as the ground beneath me fractured violently, the lusty chasm roaring open, trying to swallow us both whole. No. No. I screamed, but as I looked down, her ethereal form began to shimmer, rippling like a distorted reflection in water. The faces of all the lost children echoed back at me through the shifting air, some hollowed out, others radiating an unbearable sorrow that cut deep into me. They all recalled a time before they were lost, their laughter like knives in my heart. The floor groaned as I wavered on the edge, the multitude of dark faces pressing against the boundary of light. Your choice was selfish, she is lost now too. They wailed, crescendoing in despair, their voices drowning the last vestiges of my hope. I turned back to the door, the light flickering, and for a brief moment, everything stood still. Shapes began to coalesce before me, forms twisted with malevolence and dread, all desperate to drag me into the void. Lost in despair, I blinked, realizing the moment was slipping. I found myself alone, an invisible weight bearing down on my chest, each breath becoming a futile act of defiance. The dark twin smiled wider, her eyes now burning with an abyssal hunger. Welcome to your nightmare, she hissed, darker than the shadows that clung to the corners of my mind, and with that, the floor crumbled beneath me as the very essence of the house trembled violently, cascade folds of shadow erupting in every direction. I fell, tumbling through an eternal void, time fracturing around me as I felt the ground shake and break even further, but then, amidst the chaos, I heard it, a soft murmur slicing through the cacophony. Help me, a voice, unrecognizable yet achingly familiar, pierced the veil of despair. Hope flickered, igniting a primal urge to reach out, to grasp again. As I fell too deep into the darkness, I saw a face at the edge of the abyss, another child caught between realms, reaching out toward me. The question hung heavy in the air, suffocating. Could I dare to choose again, or would my next choice drive both of us into eternal torment? I had mere moments before the falling would cease, before the abyss would consume us both. The fear pounded through my veins as chaos roared into silence. Darkness loomed, heavy and all-consuming. Would I reach for that child's hand, or would I once again choose my own survival at the cost of another? The weight of it all coiled around my being like a serpent ready to squeeze the last ounce of life from me. The moment stretched, a heartbeat suspended in horror as the very essence of choice hung on the cusp of oblivion. As the silence enveloped me, I felt time itself buckle, the ground beneath faltering, and in that sinister stillness, the murmur of the child reverberated, an invitation draped in urgency and sheer terror. Help me, it wasn't merely a plea, it was a shard of desperation etched in anguish. I was suspended, weightless, my mind racing as the darkness settled around me like a shroud. The seconds that ticked by seemed to stretch into eternity, and I could sense the emptiness consuming the void around us. The child's outstretched hand hovered tantalizingly close, mere inches from grasping what could either bind us together or tear us apart. Yet every fiber of my being screamed to abandon the darkness, to flee its malevolence, but still, the weight of the choice paralyzed me. Then my heart thumped violently against my ribs, the sound echoing like a war drum in the enveloping silence. I glanced back into the abyss, where the faces of the lost children shimmered like ghosts, their mouths moving in silent screams of anguish. They were collateral damage in this sinister game, a reminder of what lay at stake. Choose. The dark twin's voice slithered through the dark, a whisper curling around my spine, teasing and taunting. Choose wisely this time. She floated at the edges of my consciousness, wicked glee glimmering in her crimson eyes. Help me. The child implored again, hope mingling with despair, her little features twisted in longing. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, something that pierced through the fog of my fear. But what if choosing her meant sealing my own fate? What if I condemned us both? In that moment, the realization twisted deep within me. It had only been a fleeting breath since I had dismissed the child's need, trading warmth for self-preservation. As I continued to hover at the crossroads of eternity, shadows twisted and writhed around me, tightening their grip, ghoulish voices returning, inching back into clarity, each note feeding the growing dread. You must decide. Once more you dally, once more you despair. The time of reckoning approaches. My hand, the child cried out in earnest desperation, extending her palm, a fragile thread of light woven through inky darkness. My heart raced as I peered deeper into her luminous eyes. She represented everything the dark twin despised: innocence and hope. With a sudden surge of courage that I didn't know I possessed, I lunged forward, grasping for her hand. But just as our fingers grazed, the very air around me shifted violently, swirling into a tornado of darkness. I felt myself pulled, dragged into the depths of the abyss, the icy grip of the shadows wrapping around me like a wicked embrace. No! I screamed, fighting against the invisible force that sought to tear us apart. I could feel the child's touch slipping away, her scream resonating in my ears as I struggled against the tide of hopelessness threatening to sweep me away. The dark twin laughed, a guttural sound slicing through the maelstrom. "You're too late. She is a part of the bargain now." The shadows thickened as voices of the other children rose up in unison, an unholy choir lamenting lost chances, unfulfilled dreams echoing through the void. But in the depths of my despair, a flicker ignited within my core, a whisper of untold strength manifested by the weight of responsibility. I could not allow her fate to mirror those who had come before, tethered forever to this malignant prison. With every ounce of will I could muster, I yanked my arm back and took a step forward, plunging deeper into the darkness that sought to claim me. I was determined to defy this malevolence, to pull the child away from its grasp. "No!" I shouted, and in that moment of resolve, I called upon the strength born of my suffering, the raw urgency of my care. "Together!" The word burst from my lips, a battle cry against the unyielding void. "We can escape together!" But the darkness roared in discontent, the shrieking voices coiling tighter around my limbs, pulling me down, laughing, urging me to relent. Suddenly, I felt something shift. The child's small hand linked with mine, a fleeting moment of warmth igniting hope as I yanked upward. Everywhere around us the shadows twisted through the air, shrieking in indignation. But at that precise instant, what I hadn't expected became terrifyingly apparent. A gaping maw opened beneath us, a portal to a further abyss, a depth I could not fathom. The boundaries of light flickered as the dark twin's laughter crescendoed, and I caught another glimpse of possibility gleaming at the edge of despair. "Both shall be lost," she yelled, her voice echoing through the void, a promise laced with cruelty. The child's grip tightened around my hand, but that warmth faded instantly as the dark tendrils began to unravel the very essence of what anchored us both. As the ground trembled beneath my feet, the reality of my choice echoed through me. With every heartbeat I had to decide, not just for her sake but for my own salvation. And as the darkness kissed my skin, a new voice arose within the cacophony. "Let go!" It made the hairs stand on end, an unbearable force drawn from a place I couldn't fathom, tugging inside my chest like a riptide. I felt the world grow heavier, stretched taut against impending collapse. That I looked into the child's eyes once more, their pleading filled with a unique depth of understanding. I was faced with an unfathomable dilemma. Could I truly save her without endangering myself, or was I destined to lose us both in an act of futile rebellion? Time warped, the shadows closing in, and then a terrible realization struck me: if I held on, I might drag us both into the abyss. But if I let go, would she plummet alone into darkness? I was trapped in a harrowing paradox, and the choice loomed larger than any I had ever faced. "Help me," the child begged kindred, the whispered words echoing hollow before I could respond. My breath quickened, puncturing through the droning murmurs, and then I felt it, a haunting truth beneath the chaos. Whatever fate awaited us, I had to make the choice now, or we would be swallowed whole. Would I dare let go, or was my only escape now treachery? And with that realization looming, the ground beneath us shattered, the world fracturing like thin glass, and as the darkness rushed in, I knew I was out of time. The darkness swallowed me whole, the air thick with a stench of despair, a familiar odor. I had gone from the cusp of salvation to the precipice of oblivion, caught between dimensions of anguish and longing. At that moment, the child's small hand slipped from mine, her innocent grip dissolving into the void, and her terrified scream echoed as silence engulfed us both. The shadows surged inside my mind, a cacophony of lost souls clamoring for release, their whispers clawing at my sanity like ravenous animals. "You abandoned her. You chose yourself. They jeered, voices intertwining with my own thoughts, echoing my deepest anxieties. My heart raced, panic coiling tighter as memories flickered like dying fireflies, tangled in the dark tendrils of the shadowed figures I had encircled myself with, but in this relentless chaos, something had shifted. An unforgiving revelation surged through me. The light had not been mere a door. It was a choice, a conduit, a chance to break the cycles of suffering that drained this realm. Were they truly lost, or were they reflections of my own haunted past? Within the swirling shadows, I glimpsed their faces, the lost children who had intertwined their fates with mine, some whose pain gave birth to mine. Have you forgotten us? Their voices rose, saturating the air with anguish. Recognizing their anguish, heartbreak gnawed at me. This house had absorbed my memories, turned them into malice, my decisions reflected back in twisted mockery. You helped us find our way, now you must guide her, too, a chorus floated through the suffocating gloom. I want to let you take her. I shouted into the abyss, defiance clashing against the weight of dread. Yet, the shadows thickened, creeping closer, their embrace suffocating. With growing resolve, I recalled the light, the memory of it illuminated everything. It was warmth, freedom, and yet, it beckoned with a steep price. Was I the only one who could reverse the curse that shrouded this house? In that dreadful stillness, something stirred, the child's voice pierced through again, echoing more profound, "Help me, please." I was spiraling, caught in a current of darker choices, yet I saw her face, urging me forward. I couldn't abandon her, nor would I bow to this darkness. I remembered the truth I'd buried deep within me: lost souls had but one choice, to save one another, or be consumed eternally. This time I pressed through the chaos, my voice rising with the echo of my own heartbeat. This time, I choose to let go. The walls of the abyss writhed around me as I closed my eyes, surrendering myself to a deeper darkness. In a rush, I reached out, seeking to anchor the child's small hands, but instead, I ripped free from the shadows that clung, the darkness howling in rage as an unseen force surrounded me, pooling in the very essence of despair. The noise grew deafening, and just as despair threatened to drown me entirely, I plummeted. Each ounce of anguish clung to me, but I forged through it, willing to dive deeper than the darkness, past the screams of its many lost, suddenly silence. My heart thumped violently in my chest, desperation clawing against the thread that separated us. Trembling, I opened my eyes, and there it was, the shimmering light of my choice, and standing before it, the child. I could see her now, pure, untainted, an ethereal glow illuminating her innocence as she reached for me, calling from the other side. That I lunged forward, grasping her tiny hand once more, but as I pulled her into the light, the blackness roared, surging from behind, a flood of specters converging, determined to reclaim what they believed to be theirs. The shadows writhed, spirits thrashing, angry at being cast out from the flickering glow of hope. No. The dark twin's voice shattered the silence as fear and fury cast shadows over her expression. You cannot thwart us. I felt a tremor pass violently through the air, fear coursed through me, but I held tightly to the child's hand, letting the warmth seep through me. Together, we surged forward into the light, our sanctuary, a promise of freedom and connection. But as I stepped into the brilliance, everything shifted. Horror dwelled beneath the shimmer. It became apparent then that the child wasn't simply a lost soul to save, she was intertwined with my very fate. With a rush, I was drawn back, the walls of reality cracked, and in that instant, I cherished and feared the truth. The house wasn't a prison but a mirror. It consumed my own dark reflections, my choices, and every soul I once abandoned. The child was a part of me, a specter of my own past, my burden, my hope. And in rescuing her, I unearthed that I could no longer escape my darkness nor the choices birthed out of my craven decisions. In terror, I spun around as the shadows intensified, thrumming with insatiable greed. You will pay. They screamed, the collective resonance of countless voices echoing in the chamber of my mind. The energy shifted, cascading, heavily seeking vengeance as I clutched the child's hand tighter. Realization struck with the disastrous knowledge: I would pay the price for abandoning others, but if I sacrificed myself, where would we both end? I couldn't be the bridge between light and darkness, I was its tormentor. Choose, the dark twin hissed, a horrific grin slicing across her spectral face. That I in that moment of unavoidable truth, I pulled the child closer, whispering fiercely, together we break free but at a cost. As the shadows closed around us, I closed my eyes, offering a prayer to the winds of fate. The walls quaked one last time as the dark twin turned into whirling remnants of forgotten despair. Together, we all would fall or rise. And in that moment, two young souls unfurled their hands, igniting an unimaginable burst of light, the shackles of fate tingling through the air, rending the very fabric of the house apart. Outside, the remnants of agony blended with a shattering thunderclap, as the light erupted. It surged forward, blooming across the night. The shadows crept back, screeching, echoing through this forsaken home. Then, as the specters faded, it emerged, hope laid bare, memories released into the void, washing the house clean. And ultimately, mixing in the afterglow, whispers rang anew, "Ye shall never return." The darkness relinquished its grip, leaving behind silence, a soft stillness, and the faint echo of dreams lost forevermore. As the house trembled and fell silent, a chilling realization coursed through my veins. Someday I would look back, confronted by specters of choice. Because I had known this, how easy it was to step into the darkness. "Welcome home," I murmured, knowing full well I had been both the savior and the monster entwined, forever binding my fate and the echo of forgotten cries. But the laughter lingered in the shadows, the chilling reminder that, as long as those memories existed, the darkness would always linger, hungry, waiting, alive.